件は人類史上稀に見る大災害、大正12年9月1日の関東大震災を超える悲劇となった朝鮮人虐殺事件を正当化するために検挙した事件であると疑わざるを得ません。日本国を代表する最高権威である裁判所は全世界に向けてその立場を明確に示すべきであります。この二人のためではなく、日本という国家の疑惑を晴らすために疑問に答えることを要求いたします。
誰に要
Anarchist from Colony, Korean name Park Yul, is a South Korean biological period drama film that was released on June 28, 2017. This film follows the life of anarchist Park Yul and the events of the Ganto massacre. In its opening weekend, the film topped box office sales with $5.9 million and later premiered in the US at LA, Buena Park, and Dallas. Directed by Lee Jun-hee, this film takes a romanticized approach to Park Yul's life, ultimately facing criticism for this decision. As Lee Jun-hee is a credited director already known for his 2005 film King and the Clown, which happens to be one of Korea's highest-grossing films of all time, the public established high standards for this film's success, which was ultimately met. Part of this film's major success was the actor Lee Jae-hoon, who plays main character Park Yul, which is heavily based on anarchist Park Yul. From his previous films and TV appearances, his acting career was set in stone and became a positive reputation for him, which made him desirable for this film. As his literal partner in crime in the show, Choi Hee-soo stars as the second lead role Fumiko Kaneko, a betrayed Japanese woman who later became a Korean activist. For Choi Hee-soo, this film set her place as a successful actor, leading to her nomination in many award shows as an upcoming actress. From this role, she set the record for winning 11 accolades in a single award show. At the beginning of the film, we begin in Kanto, Japan, where we see Park Yul and Fumiko Kaneko meeting and ultimately planning their attempt to bomb the emperor. In these beginning moments, the Kanto earthquake occurs, which then begins to stir the community into chaos that spirals into the Kanto massacre. The film's main antagonist, Mitsuno, who is Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, then began to spur chaos and lies within the Japanese government, accusing the Koreans of poisoning water wells and other riots. These accusations derived by his grievance of the March 1st events and were historically accurate from the Korean labor unions, which decided to donate food in order to help recovery relief on the day of the earthquake. The next day, on September 2nd, Mitsuno leaked false information to news stations and to other civilians that approved them to use their own forces to murder Koreans on site. For nearly 3 weeks, Koreans hid in fear and chaos of being caught as they were killed based on speech tests and looks. Fumiko and Park Yul, during this period of chaos, managed to turn themselves into the police because they thought this would be sovereignty, but later this plan backfired. After their plans to bomb the emperor were leaked by one of their comrades, both Fumiko and Park Yul were then convicted of high treason for their actions and required to appear in court to receive a sentence. As the court hearing finally arrives, both Koreans and Japanese come to witness this event. Although the Korean attendees were removed from the room, they were able to use this to spread awareness of the Kanto massacre and publicize this historic event. Knowing he's going to be sentenced to death, Park Yul uses this opportunity to expose the Japanese government for their censorship of the Kanto massacre. Living on their death sentence, an imperial pardon was granted to both of them, reducing it to a life term. Promising to get out together, Fumiko and Park Yul were granted a legal marriage in the film before Fumiko's mysterious suicide, which has been speculated to this day to be a murder instead. Lastly, this film ends by transitioning the photo taken in the film versus the one in reality, paying homage to the original activists. On September 1, 1923, an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.9 struck the Kanto region, which later sparked the Kanto massacre and was shown in the beginning of this film. Beginning the same day as the earthquake, the Kanto massacre was a 3-week period of terror and chaos for Koreans and Chinese living within the region. Beginning with the Korean labor unions offering food relief, the Japanese government used this as a tactic to blame Koreans, allowing false rumors to spread to lynch mobs and others to kill any non-Japanese on site. For the next 3 weeks, lynch mobs formed and used very excessive ways to kill Koreans. In the wake of this disaster, over 6,000 people died, and the Japanese government was only concerned with censoring their own media. On September 18, 1923, the Japanese government arrested over 700 participants of the massacre, but had no intention of actually persecuting them for their actions. To this day, Japan has yet to acknowledge this massacre. Living through this massacre, the film revolves around the life of Pacquiao and his engagements with Fumiko Kaneko. Together, they published 2 magazines that exposed Japan for their treatment of Koreans and founded several anarchist groups. With Fumiko, both were convicted of high treason for their plan to bomb the emperor, ultimately sentenced to death and later pardoned to a life sentence, which is accurate to the film. In the film, the movie highlights Fumiko's tragic backstory as a reason for her actions. Born out of wedlock, Fumiko faced a trialing youth as she was unable to be registered by the Japanese government for 8 years. As she constantly slaved away for her family, in her teenage years she was able to become educated and explore the ideology of socialism and anarchism. This was when she met Park-yeol and her life changed and ultimately lived out their fate together. In prison, she was able to write a 1,000-page autobiography about her life. After releasing, the film ultimately faced much criticism by news outlets for neglecting the bigger issue of the Kanto massacre. By romanticizing the story, many viewers felt this was the wrong approach to discussing such a trialing event to Koreans that has still yet to receive proper justice by Japan. As censorship is such a prevalent matter in this film, I wanted to dive more into this issue and how it affects Japan to this day. Shown in the quote by Georgetown, many historians accredit the Kanto massacre as the beginning of extreme censorship and denialism in Japan. To this day, Japan refuses to acknowledge this massacre to Koreans and is recorded that the right-wing party still views this as a success in Japan's history rather than a wrong. In Japan, government-enforced censorship wasn't recognized until the Edo period, when Christianity was banned as it could challenge imperial decisions. This trend has continued into the Meiji period that involved Japan's annexation of Korea. Media that was anti-imperial was heavily censored, and this censorship began to be legally supported by the government. With the press ordinance and publication law both heavily censored and punished those who spoke about socialist ideas and went against the emperor in any way, often targeting Koreans. Following into the Taisho period, the censorship exponentially became more severe with the addition of the death penalty and the Special Higher Police Force, a group dedicated solely to censorship preservation. These extreme acts imprisoned many Koreans and Japanese for their thought imprisonments, as no one could think against the emperor. To this day, censorship heavily affects Japan and its citizens. In the period of anarchists from colony, many Japanese citizens were left in the dark of the spring events and were confused on how to live their daily lives. As forced images became mainstream, many Japanese felt robbed of their citizenship and lived in a constant fear that they would be caught next for something they didn't even know about. Many children were also penalized by censorship from erasing history and their influences from other sources that weren't Japanese. Aside from the heavy criticization this film experienced, I thought it was a unique approach to the Kanto massacre and the life of Pacquiao and Fumiko Kaneko, and their contributions to the censorship issue with Japan. For me, this film stuck out compared to the other films that we watched during the same time period for its romanticization and balance of historical accuracy. Although I agree that it was romanticized a little too much and kind of downplayed the severity of the Kanto massacre, where this is an issue that still has yet to be addressed, it did bring some light to this matter and emphasize the importance of censorship and why this is such a dangerous act.